This is Land of Havilah, 1 Kings 14. We've got parallel histories going on now of the kingdoms of Judah in the south and Israel in the north. The text will be switching back and forth between the two kingdoms for the rest of the book. Now in Jeroboam's northern kingdom, verse 1, at that time Abijah the son of Jeroboam became sick. Comment, this is the first we've heard of Abijah, son of Jeroboam. He's a child, as we find out. Verse 2, Jeroboam said to his wife, "Please get up and disguise yourself so that you won't be recognized as Jeroboam's wife. Go to Shiloh. Behold, Ahijah the prophet is there, who said that I would be king over this people. Take with you 10 loaves of bread, some cakes, and a jar of honey, and go to him. He will tell you what will become of the child." Jeroboam's wife did so, and arose and went to Shiloh and came to Ahijah's house. Comment, here two similar names again, Abijah the child and Ahijah the prophet. The boy is sick, and Jeroboam wants his wife to get answers from the prophet. He's the same prophet who some years ago pulled Jeroboam aside in a field and told him he would be king over Israel. So this is a true prophet of Yahweh. He's not one of the pagan priests that Jeroboam has set up. So Jeroboam's going to a servant of Yahweh for answers, not to one of the pagan priests. By sending his wife to the prophet, he's testifying that he needs Yahweh, but he's already rejected Yahweh. So he's going to try to fool the prophet and fool Yahweh by having his wife disguise herself when she goes. All of us have an inadequate concept of the greatness of God, but Jeroboam's concept is certainly very inadequate. Underestimating Yahweh is a basic universal mistake unless by grace we can escape it. Coming up, Jeroboam's wife is in disguise, and she's approaching Ahijah's house in Shiloh, still in verse 4. Now Ahijah could not see, for his eyes were set by reason of his age. Comment, the prophet's eyes were set, meaning he couldn't see well enough to track objects with his eyes. It was by reason of age, it says, so it was probably a case of advanced cataracts. Yahweh is going to speak to Ahijah as we go to verse 5. Yahweh said to Ahijah, "Behold, Jeroboam's wife is coming to inquire of you concerning her son, for he is sick. Tell her such and such, for it will be when she comes in that she will pretend to be another woman." So when Ahijah heard the sound of her feet as she came in at the door, he said, "Come in, Jeroboam's wife. Why do you pretend to be another?" Comment, she's pretending to be another because Jeroboam has made himself an enemy of Ahijah's God Yahweh. Ahijah goes on, still in verse 6. "For I am sent to you with heavy news. Go tell Jeroboam, Yahweh, the God of Israel, says, Because I exalted you from among the people, and made you prince over my people Israel, and tore the kingdom away from David's house and gave it to you, and yet you have not been as my servant David, who kept my commandments, and who followed me with all his heart, to do that only which was right in my eyes, but have done evil above all who were before you, and have gone and made for yourself other gods, molten images, to provoke me to anger, and have cast me behind your back." Comment, Yahweh says, in effect, I tore most of the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you, but now you also have abandoned me, or as he said, cast me behind your back. As a consequence, Yahweh says through Ahijah, verse 10, "Therefore, behold, I will bring evil on the house of Jeroboam, and will cut off from Jeroboam everyone who urinates on a wall, he who is shut up and he who is left at large in Israel, and will utterly sweep away the house of Jeroboam, as a man sweeps away dung until it is all gone." Comment, that's some pretty salty language from the Lord our God, born of anger. That phrase, everyone who urinates on a wall, obviously indicates all males descended from Jeroboam old enough to stand up and go outside. Yahweh will cut off, meaning kill, every last one of Jeroboam's male descendants. Ahijah is still speaking in Yahweh's voice, verse 11. "The dogs will eat he who belongs to Jeroboam, who dies in the city, and the birds of the sky will eat he who dies in the field, for Yahweh has spoken it." Comment, Yahweh will be sure to establish this word, no matter how long it takes or how improbable. Eventually we can be sure that literally dogs will eat Jeroboam's descendants who die in the city, and birds those who die in the field. Verse 12. "Arise therefore and go to your house. When your feet enter the city, the child will die. All Israel will mourn for him and bury him, for he only of Jeroboam will come to the grave, because in him there is found some good thing toward Yahweh, the God of Israel, in the house of Jeroboam. Comment, interesting. There's something in this child that Yahweh already recognizes in a positive light. The boy has in him, quote, some good thing toward Yahweh, end quote. Therefore Yahweh will grant the boy the decency of a burial rather than giving his body over to dogs or birds. Verse 14, Moreover, Yahweh will raise up a king for himself over Israel, who will cut off the house of Jeroboam. This is the day. What? Even now. Comment, obviously, if all Jeroboam's family will be cut off, his dynasty will come to an end. Coming up here again, the name Israel refers to the northern kingdom. Ahijah still speaking, verse 15. For Yahweh will strike Israel as a reed is shaken in the water, and he will root up Israel out of this good land which he gave to their fathers, and will scatter them beyond the river, because they have made their Asherah poles, provoking Yahweh to anger. Comment, wow, before Yahweh even brought Israel out of the desert into the promised land, he said he was going to displace the Canaanites because of their abominations, and was going to give Israel their land. But he warned at the time, if Israel were to adopt the abominations of the Canaanites, he would displace them just the same. He said the land would vomit Israel out, just as it vomited out the Canaanites, Leviticus 18:25-28. Yahweh gave that warning about 525 years before Jeroboam. Yahweh has had continual trouble with their idolatry all this time, off and on, but now under Jeroboam there's barely anything left to salvage. Here again, the vomiting of the northern kingdom won't happen immediately. It's going to be another 135 years approximately, and many more kings of the north will take the throne. But Yahweh's making very plain now that he will indeed remove them from the land, specifically in a scattering beyond the Euphrates River, as verse 15 said. Why will this happen? Ahijah still speaking, verse 16. He will give Israel up because of the sins of Jeroboam, which he has sinned, and with which he has made Israel to sin. Comment, there will be many more references as time goes by to the sin of Jeroboam, which in a word is idolatry, or an underestimation of Yahweh. The northern kingdom won't ever be able to reverse the course on which Jeroboam has set them. It'll be one sordid tale after another for the next 135 years, a tale of the consequences of idolatry. Verse 17. Jeroboam's wife arose and departed and came to Tirzah. Comment, that's the first mention of the city of Tirzah, which is now Jeroboam's home, and it'll be the home of the next 4 kings of Israel. Jeroboam's wife has arrived there, and still in verse 17, as she came to the threshold of the house, the child died. All Israel buried him and mourned for him, according to Yahweh's word, which he spoke by his servant Ahijah the prophet. Comment, that is, Ahijah predicted the boy would die as soon as Jeroboam's wife got home, and that's the way it happened. Now flashing forward, verse 19. The rest of the acts of Jeroboam, how he fought and how he reigned, behold, they are written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel. The days which Jeroboam reigned were 22 years. Then he slept with his fathers, and Nadab, his son, reigned in his place. Comment. So that was Jeroboam, end of story, the man whom Yahweh made king of the north. Yahweh snatched the north away from the house of David to give it to Jeroboam, but he threw it all away and set the north on an irreversible course. As it just said, his son Nadab reigned in his place, but we know the dynasty will come to an end at some point. Now turning attention back to the south, to Rehoboam, king of Judah, verse 21. Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, reigned in Judah. Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which Yahweh had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess. Comment, Solomon had 1,000 wives, including the daughter of Pharaoh, who had her own grand palace on the temple grounds, 1 Kings 7:8. Solomon certainly had many sons from 1,000 wives, and Rehoboam's mother happened to be not the son of Pharaoh's daughter, but of Naamah the Ammonitess. That's the first mention of her, but interestingly, she wasn't an Israelitess, so she had a pagan upbringing, and she brought that upbringing with her to Israel, and probably instilled it in her son Rehoboam, judging from what's coming next. Certainly by the time Solomon was old, he was accommodating paganism himself, so Rehoboam had a bad example from father and mother. He took the throne in an idolatrous environment, and he's certainly not the man to reverse course, as we go to verse 22. Judah did that which was evil in Yahweh's sight, and they provoked him to jealousy with their sins which they committed, above all that their fathers had done. Comment, they provoked Yahweh in the south as well, led by Rehoboam. They did it, quote, above their fathers, meaning worse than ever, verse 23. For they also built for themselves high places, sacred pillars, and Asherah poles on every high hill and under every green tree. There were also Sodomites in the land. They did according to all the abominations of the nations which Yahweh drove out before the children of Israel. Comment, there were Sodomites in the land, which has been translated frequently as male cult prostitutes. It's sodomy that's institutionalized, organized, and publicly tolerated. In addition to that, the South has also adopted all the other Canaanite abominations. Verse 25. In the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, and he took away the treasures of Yahweh's house and the treasures of the king's house. He even took away all of it, including all the gold shields which Solomon had made. King Rehoboam made shields of brass in their place, and committed them to the hands of the captains of the guard who kept the door of the king's house. It was so that as often as the king went into Yahweh's house, the guard bore them and brought them back into the guard room. Comment, Solomon had an alliance with Pharaoh, 1 Kings 3:1, but that alliance has broken down. Pharaoh Shishak waltzed right in and took, quote, all of it. At today's value, there were billions of dollars worth of gold in Jerusalem, which was amassed mostly by David and Solomon and used by Solomon to build the temple and in the making of shields for ceremony and display, and for dishes and cups and for any use whatsoever, and in storage, to the point that silver was considered of little value, 1 Kings 7:51 and 1 Kings 10:21. But the days of the gold being everywhere are gone in one generation, verse 29. Now the rest of the acts of Rehoboam and all that he did, aren't they written in the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Judah? There was war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam continually. Rehoboam slept with his fathers and was buried with his fathers in David's city. His mother's name was Naamah the Ammonitess. Abijam, his son, reigned in his place. Comment, there was continual war between Rehoboam and Jeroboam. We were unaware of that until verse 30. More about that coming in Chronicles. Abijam, also called Abijah, is now reigning in his father Rehoboam's place. He'll be the 4th king of the house of David and Judah, with 17 more to come, all the way until Babylon takes the south into captivity. The house of Jeroboam is still hanging on in the north, with Nadab sitting on the throne. It's now about 913 B.C. Let's not feel inadequate if we can't remember the names of all the kings. It's about impossible to keep them in memory unless they do outstanding things to distinguish themselves. 1 Kings 15 is next at landofhavilah.net, 1 Kings 15. This is the map of 1 Kings 14. Jeroboam is living in Tirzah. He sent his wife to the prophet in Shiloh. 1 Kings 15 is next.